welcome to Daily Debrief brought to you by People's Dispatch. I'm Pragya. As the two-day Bali summit of the G20 begins on November 15, the Russia-Ukraine conflict is at the top of discussions. How the United States and China engage will also be watched. In our next story, what happens to cryptocurrency after the FTX meltdown? And what to expect in the FIFA World Cup in Qatar that starts on November 20. Western countries and other nations may see the rising energy costs and food shortages from very different perspectives. This will provide a significant part of the context to the Bali summit of the G20 starting Tuesday. Russian President Vladimir Putin won't be attending, so talks between him and the United States President Joe Biden are ruled out. The United Kingdom has also said Bali won't be business as usual due to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We talked to Prashant from People's Dispatch about what to expect. Has the G20 become a forum where the Russia-Ukraine conflict will be the sole agenda? Is there a possibility of back-channel negotiations? Right, Prashant, thanks for joining us. So, Prashant, a lot of discussion in the run-up to the G20 about actually what will be happening on behind the scenes. So, can you just tell us what is the context, what is the overall situation here?
Right, Pragya, this is a especially unique G20 meeting because there's a lot happening. We'll come to that. There's a lot of tension in the backgrounds. I believe the Sherpas who were involved in deciding the agenda, they've had a very tough task in determining how to take it forward. There's been quite a lot of background tension also because of the fact that the Ukraine war is really looming over the agenda. But before we get into some of these topics, I think a key point, of course, is to note is the Xi Jinping-Joe Biden meeting that is currently, as we are recording, going on. We'll be discussing it in detail tomorrow. But nonetheless, a very significant meeting. Observers saying that no concrete outcomes maybe are expected. But the fact that these two leaders are meeting at a time when, tensions are at an all-time high is a very significant thing. And as you know, on this show, we always keep talking about the need for dialogue, the need for discussion to continuously happen. And it's a very positive sign that the leaders of these two powerful forces, global forces, are meeting, because right now relations between them are at an all-time low. We know that Nancy Pelosi landed in Taiwan, sparked off a huge amount of tension and concerns about that. The issue of Taiwan has become far more. It has risen much more to the surface, especially due to Joe Biden's comments, China's responses. So not a great time for US-China ties right now. And if the ties between the US and China are in a bad shape, the entire world is in danger. So that's one thing I think we really need to, I would say it's a positive thing. But other than that, we're going to have a lot of side summits as well about all kinds of issues. But ultimately what all of this boils down to is the Ukraine war. So really, there's no escaping that.
Right, Prashant. Prashant, how, it's going to be important for countries to try and frame the war in their own way. So what are the different things we can expect them to say and do here?
Right. So, I mean, we've been talking to somebody on the ground, Siddharth Roy, who's also an independent journalist covering this issue, as well as experts. And all of them kind of point to the fact that the G20 at this point has become pretty much, it's almost become irrelevant in some senses right now, because what we are seeing is, on the one hand, we have the Western powers or the G7 powers, who have taken a very, very strong stand on the issue of Russia and Ukraine, for instance, and are pushing this summit to be exclusively some kind of a referendum, so to speak, on that issue. And of course, on the other hand, you have Russia. China is much closer to Russia, etc., etc. So what this basically means is that this issue is basically, as of now, it looks like this issue is what is going to really dominate the summit, which means that for the G20 itself, any other agenda is it's not likely to maybe succeed at a huge level, except for some backroom agreements or whatever. But the G20's relevance itself is likely to be questioned because it becomes divided or torn forum, so to speak. And the countries which are really going to suffer in this context are the non-G7 members of the G20, who are seeking for increased role in international affairs because of their population, because of their size, because of their economic wealth and relevance, etc., etc. So these countries are the ones which are really suffering. Indonesia is one, India to some extent is another. So that's one major takeaway from this point. Point number two is the fact that I think important to note that as far as I think as our colleague was pointing out, the African Union in fact wanted a seat at the G20.
Right.
Right now, only South Africa is the only member from that continent, but even that has not been entertained, again raising exactly the same questions. So the real question is that is this summit one where the G20's relevance is going to be further pushed down, and we're going back to a time when the G7 is what decides makes all the decisions about all the important issues, etc., etc. So is that what we are seeing through a meeting like this, where there seems to be a concerted effort to make sure that this issue alone is what dominates discussions? Now, equally importantly, the other question is that is there a possibility for any kind of back channel talks at all? That's a very important question. Right now, it doesn't look very positive, but for all you know, something might be happening. But that's a very, very important question as far as this war is concerned, because we have Sergei Lavrov also attending the meeting. Of course, we have top US officials. Is there a possibility that even some kind of dialogue, maybe not negotiation or a formal thing, but the possibility that even some kind of channels could open, because that's very essential at this point. So that's another thing to sort of watch and see as well. So I guess some of the public pronouncements will give us more of an idea about, in the next 2 days, will give us more of an idea about how things are going. Equally importantly, and finally to note that this meeting is taking place ahead of December 5th, when sanctions on the exporting of Russian oil products are going to,
right.
Crude oil products are going to come in. And that is going to, how that's going to work out is really a major question. We know that the US, for instance, has heavily leaned on India to stop buying crude from Russia. India has refused. So that's also another major background element to be considered. So all this, so we're going to have quite a chaotic 2 days, I believe. And a lot of experts are very pessimistic about the G20 in general, this summit in particular, and whether it will have any relevance as a global body at all. But we need to see, we'll wait and see about what the reports say.
Right, Prashant. Thanks for joining us. Last week, Sam Bankman-Fried's FTX, which was a cryptocurrency exchange, and its trading arm, Alameda Research, went under. At its peak, the FTX group was worth 32 billion US dollars and raised funding from top global funders such as SoftBank. The crash has led to fresh questions on the future of cryptocurrencies and the risks involved with it. Tech expert Bappa Sinha has often warned about problems with cryptocurrency and why enthusiasts have been getting it wrong. Bappa, thanks for joining us. Bappa, FTX, what has happened to it and why?
So FTX is one of the biggest cryptocurrency exchanges in the world. It's, I think, the second biggest one. The biggest one is a company called Binance. And its CEO is a fairly colorful individual called SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried. They were remarkably successful over the last few years. This came from nowhere in 2019 and built one of the biggest cryptocurrency exchanges. The net worth of the exchange, FTX, of the FTX group was at its peak about $32 billion at the beginning of the year. And they had raised funding from very high, from the biggest, some of the biggest VC firms. They had raised money from Sequoia Capital, from SoftBank. And then over this weekend, they just collapsed. They pretty much went to zero. And there are really two big companies in this group. There is FTX, which is a cryptocurrency trading exchange, and there is something called Alameda Research, which is like a hedge fund in cryptocurrencies. And both of them just collapsed and went to zero. And that's kind of caused major shock waves in the crypto world. That this is not the first of these,
right.
But we have seen many of these over this summer, and this is the latest in this. It's probably bigger than the ones we have seen before because they were some of the biggest names in the crypto world.
Bappa, like you said, this summer has been very bad for crypto, one after the other, now the FTX. So can you explain why this happens repeatedly, what it signifies?
Yeah, so see, the entire crypto space was touted to be this future of money, and like they were saying that in this new digital world, we will have money which is like digital money, and they were saying like, oh, the banks are corrupt, and so you will have these new kind of not just money, but what they were calling decentralized finance.
Right.
So, and all this would be in a blockchain which is public, so it can be examined by anybody, and there will be transparency, and all the problems of the world will be solved by these new technologies. But what was instead happening was that this was kind of the wild west of finance, right? Now, regular finance, like banks, investment houses, they are governed by lots of regulations, right? And for good reason, because you are handling huge amounts of money, and that could lead to major collapses. If a bank collapses, it affects not just the bank, but its customers, it affects the overall economy. And similarly with investment houses, we have seen investment houses going down, but that causes major ripple effects across the economy, and hence these are very regulated sectors, yes. Right? Now, with this cryptocurrency, this was completely unregulated, and so people were doing pretty much whatever they were wanted, and effectively what they were doing was criminal, right? They were running what are called pyramid schemes, right? So Ponzi schemes. So and they were promising extraordinary yields, and then they were doing very shady things underneath, and all of them were doing it. And when all of this, because worldwide money was cheap, because the interest rates were so low, when the going was good, they were basically, what they were doing was they were investing in each other, and they were doing leveraged investments. So they were taking loans and then investing, and as the entire crypto market was rising, you had people making huge amount of money, or at least paper money. But once the crypto market started collapsing, these leverage loans are starting to blow up all over the place, right? For example, if you look at this current case, it's a very complicated web, right? So FTX, the exchange, and Alameda Research, there's apparently separate entities. But what was happening, apparently, everything is not, all the details are not out, but what people are speculating is that Alameda Research was taking FTX's customer funds and then trading using that.
Okay.
Now, when one company takes money from another company, you have to put up a collateral. It's a loan. The collateral was FTX's tokens, which Alameda had, right? So this was like a
cyclical trade.
A cyclical trade, right? And so this worked as long as FTX's crypto coins, called FTT, as long as their value was stable, and the customers, all of the customers at the same time didn't want to take their money out. This worked. Now what happened was FTX started crashing, right? Because people figured out that there are shady things happening there. So Binance, which is their competitor, held a lot of FTT tokens, right? So Binance's CEO a few days back said that they are dumping the entire FTT because they think there is something fishy going on. And when the FTT thing started falling, the investors panicked because they thought that, rightly so, that the exchange would collapse, right? So they started withdrawing funds. So you had a double whammy, right? The FTT, the collateral, that was crashing, and the customers were demanding their funds back, which basically meant that both the exchange and the hedge fund, the Alameda Research, both of them became bankrupt instantaneously, right? And so this pattern of Ponzi schemes, of these shady cross trades, like circular trades, of huge amount of leverage, and then effectively these are online casinos and gambling with other people's money. This is systemic across the crypto world, right? Okay. And when the going was good and all the crypto coins were rising, then this led to huge amount of increase in valuation, and the crypto market went to about $3 trillion, right? But it was effectively me buying your tokens and you buying my tokens back, and there was this
basically a bubble.
Yeah, there was no fundamental behind all of this, right? This is just people raising each other's value by doing all these circular trades. Now when it's going down, those circular trades are now turning against you, and so the entire market is now crashing, and that's why we are seeing these serial bankruptcies across the crypto space.
Yeah, but this is actually real people losing, their assets in some way here.
Yeah, so while you are doing this is all for these people. These are play money, right? You are playing with other people's money, but there is some real people who are putting their money in, right? A lot of them are regular people. A lot of them were investment houses which put in their money. The investment houses have pretty much figured out that this is a scam and they have now withdrawn. But yeah, a lot of common people have lost a lot of money.
Right, Papa. Thanks for joining us with that update. Qatar will host the 2022 FIFA World Cup starting November 20, in which national teams of 32 countries will participate. The host nation has been subject to a wide range of criticism and scrutiny just as the games are set to begin. It's the first time an Arab nation is hosting a World Cup and doing so in a country with limited space and infrastructure. As fans prepare to head for the country, we speak to Siddhant from NewsClick about what's new with this tournament. So, Siddhant, thanks for joining us. Siddhant, what's new at the World Cup this year?
Quite a few things, actually, Pragya. Thanks for having me. Firstly, though, it's the last World Cup that's going to be held with 32 teams. The last men's World Cup, that is. From the next edition onwards, which is going to take place in the US and Mexico, it'll be a 48-team World Cup, so significantly larger set of teams that are going to be playing. But there's a whole host of things. It's the first World Cup, of course, that's happening in West Asia. It's the first World Cup that's happening in the winter time, at least as far as the Northern Hemisphere is concerned. Usually World Cups are held when there's a break in the leagues, the European leagues, more than most. So during the summertime, in that June-July period is when the World Cup normally is. This time, of course, it's November, December. Some technological changes also coming into play. There will be a new offside system using 3D technology and augmented reality that is designed to supposedly eliminate even further human error that comes in through refereeing, given the pace the game is played at these days. So much faster, according to the officials, much faster decision making and much more transparent also in terms of fans understanding how referees are deciding whether, particularly for the case of the offside rule and goals that happen from offside positions. So that's a big one. Obviously, climate-wise, it's an important event also. It's a World Cup that is being held in a very compact environment. So all the stadiums are sort of in a 50-mile radius,
Okay.
or 50-kilometer radius of the city of Doha, which is the capital of Qatar, and will be in air-conditioned environments because of the temperatures expected there, despite the fact that it's winter. So several questions and issues will come up in that regard. Also, another work-wise, sort of football-wise, another important change is that there will now be 5 substitutions in a game.
Okay.
So 5 different players will be allowed to be brought on. It's a change from the last World Cup in 2018, where only 3 were allowed. And if games go into extra time, that is beyond the scheduled 90 minutes, then one further substitution is allowed, taking it up to 6.
Okay.
So we'll see a lot more players probably being utilized. The chances of squad members, everyone has to play a bigger role in each team. And from a viewer perspective, 1.5 million people or so expected to come in, and everyone will be in that really small, compact environment, unlike a country like Russia, which is probably diametrically opposite, where the World Cup was spread over tens of thousands of kilometers. Everyone here will be in a very sort of tight space, which might make for a quite fun environment and allow people from all over the world, 32 countries, plus fans from, I think, all over the world will be attending. So it'll give people a space in which to meet, and no doubt, I think Doha will be quite a lively spot over the month or so to come.
Right, Siddhant, but what are the other narratives shaping up around this game, not least because of the choice of the place to hold the games? What are the different narratives here?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of stuff that's coming up. Pragya, so Al Jazeera as a media platform is now one that globally probably rivals some of the biggest news media organizations. So being a home World Cup for them, they are covering it extensively and sort of creating or countering some of the narrative that is coming out of the West. From back in 2010, when the World Cup was actually awarded to both Russia for 2018 as well as Qatar for 22, I think much of the West has been up in arms about corruption and the kind of backroom politics that goes into voting for these World Cup events to happen, because we have to remember that they are important for multiple reasons. And particularly in the case of these West Asian countries, I think the soft power narrative is one that's being peddled quite widely, I would say. So if you look at the number of articles that have been published in the run-up in the English media to the start of the 2022 Qatar World Cup, you'll find that a very large percentage actually talk about human rights issues,
Right.
things like worker issues, all issues that exist on the ground, no doubt, but also exist all over the world in that sense. Even though the last one was at Russia, the percentage jump when it comes to how Qatar is being judged on its human rights record versus even the Western media narrative of what happens in Russia is huge.
Okay.
So it brings into focus a lot of the structures in which these mega events take place, a lot of an opportunity to talk about the politics that goes into the award of these World Cups, as well as everything that has happened. FIFA has gone through a massive upheaval or change, I would say, from 2010 onwards, with corruption investigations, a change in leadership, all of those things taking place within the organization itself. All of it, which amounts to, I think, very little on the ground, because we come back to the same core issues, just with a new set of people in suits taking the decisions instead. So I think as the tournament progresses, of course, on-field narratives will emerge, but there'll be much stronger focus also on some of these things as they play out on the ground when people actually visit the country in person and form their own opinions of what so far they've only been reading and talking about from quite a distant perspective.
Siddhant, thanks for joining us, Siddhant, with that update. And that's all we have for you today. Thank you for watching Daily Debrief. Do come back to us tomorrow. You can find more such stories on our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and look out for our regular updates on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.